open this, Phil. If you would please proceed. Sorry to interrupt you with the opening statement. After that, we'll ask for the roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to the City of Roanoke Emergency Ordinance adopted by the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission on April 23rd, 2020 and 2021, Virginia General Assembly Legislation Senate Bill 1271, which passed February 27th, 2021. The April meeting of the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission is being held virtually on today, Thursday, April 22nd at 3 p.m. via Zoom. Under the current state of emergency and until further notice, it has been deemed unsafe to assemble a quorum of a public body in one place. Any members of the public may view and participate in the meeting through electronic means. Meeting details are listed on the second page of the agenda. All materials made available to the members have been made available to the public at the same time by posting on the RVARC website. This meeting is being recorded as always. Due to the virtual nature, video and audio will be recorded and provided on the website in place of written minutes. When the state of emergency ends, draft minutes from all the meetings held during this time will be ratified at the next in-person meeting. As a way of ensuring that our meeting goes smoothly, Brian Hill, Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission Regional Planner, will serve as host for this meeting. All participants are asked to mute themselves to improve audio quality. If any voting commission member wishes to make a motion, second it, or comment on a motion, please unmute yourself and ask to be recognized by the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We may be having a little bit of technical difficulty. I hope you folks caught most of that. So we will have our roll call now. Wayne, are you going to do that, please, sir? Wayne, I think you're muted, buddy.
We got to figure out a way to correct all this, you know.
You're right.
I only have 2 more months, so you know. You won't unmute me again. Miss Cox.
You're good.
Mr. Lanford.
Here.
Miss Vandersdahl.
Present.
Mr. Clinton. Miss Henderson.
Here, yeah.
I don't think Miss Henderson's here. Okay. Mr. LaRue. Mr. Martin.
Here, sir.
Mr. Collins. Miss Spence. Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Carter. Mr. Whitlow. Mr. Inslow. Miss Smith.
Present.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Here.
Mr. Hutchins. Mr. Dean Martin.
Here.
Mr. Radford.
Present.
Mr. North.
Present.
Mr. Osborne. Mr. Osborne. Miss Onitis. Mr. Tucker.
Present.
Mr. Bestpitch.
Here.
Miss Boone Reynolds.
Here.
Dr. Stanko Downey. Mr. Jeffrey.
Here.
Mr. Guzzler.
Here.
Mr. Vollison. Mr. Wallace.
Present.
Mr. Saunders. Miss King.
Here.
Mayor Marshall.
I'm here.
Mr. Irvin.
I'm here, Wayne.
Mr. Newbill. Mayor Gross.
Here.
Mr. Peters.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman, and we probably want to say goodbye to Mr. Irvin. I think this is his last week as the town manager of Vinton, and certainly as a member of the commission.
Well, I'll tell you, seems like people move around a lot in the valley. Let me just say that. So we certainly want to wish you a lot of luck, Mr. Owen.
Well, I'm not leaving, but I'll do less, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure to work with you, that's for sure.
He's
Certainly,
retiring. He's also retiring, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's great. All right, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which has several items on it this afternoon. Of course, the approval of the agenda for today are minutes from the March 25th, 2021 meeting, as well as the financial report ending in March 31, 2021. There's also an important resolution to pursue the funding support for the RVTPO, Unified Planning Work Programming, as well as resolution to approve the Rural Transportation Planning Work Program. That's their scope of work. And I assume all of you folks got that attachment and had an opportunity to look at that. Are there any changes or additions to the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll entertain a motion for approval.
So move.
Second.
Okay, I think I heard a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Bestfitch. Wayne, if you would call roll, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lanford,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vanersdal,
Yes.
Mr. Billy Martin,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Dean Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mr. North.
Yes.
I don't think Mr. Osborne has made it yet. Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Yes.
Miss Moon Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Mr. Guzzler,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Miss King,
Yes.
Murray Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Irvin,
Yes.
Mayor Gross,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Motion is approved, Mr. Chairman.
Wayne
Yes.
Thank you.
didn't call me. Crystal and Itis.
Oh, Crystal,
And you glossed over me with roll call, hon.
oh, sorry. All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wayne,
And
I'm
You're
also
here.
present and vote yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
the motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The last vote put us over the edge there. Yeah, that made everything proper, so we appreciate that.
Nope. Just because I don't have my pretty face on the Zoom. I know.
Yeah. Someone was telling me that it wasn't because they've been trapped in for a year that it's the Zoom that makes you look 10 pounds heavier. So that's what I'm going with, So, yeah. Well, folks, as some of you probably know, it is that time every couple of years, on our odd number of years, that we select new officers. So we need to appoint a nominating committee. And of course, the nominating committee would elect both the chair and the vice chair. They will, they will nominate the folks, and that will be brought to the full commission in June. The actual office term starts in October, but we, as you know, try to get the elections out of the way in June. So for the 2021 nominating committee, I'd like to appoint, if they have no objections, former commission chair Bill Bestfitch. Are we still friends, Bill? Former commission chair Billy Martin, and former commission chair Lee Osborne. And let me say to the rest of the commission, if any of you are interested in serving on this committee, please let me know. We'll gladly get you hooked up with the rest of the committee. The committee will be starting their work soon. So as I said, if you're interested, please let me know as soon as possible. And I wanted to give you a quick update on the commission search committee, the committee that we formed to find a new executive director. The committee has had two very successful meetings, so the process is moving along quite well. We have advertised the position in state and regional publications, so we feel like we've covered a large territory, and we do have a couple of applicants. So we will be bringing a recommendation to the executive committee very soon. I hope that we can do that in May, but we certainly want to be thorough in the process. But I wanted to let you know the committee is working on the search for a new executive director. And I'm glad to report that the commission has a new telework policy for the staff. Policy was developed earlier this year. Staff management team worked with Telework Virginia, which is an office within the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, to ensure that the policy conformed to best practices for teleworking. I'm also glad to report that the majority of the staff have obtained their COVID vaccinations. I think that's very important. The executive director continues to encourage all staff members to get their vaccinations. The virus is still out there, folks, so good idea to get the vaccination. And with that, we will move on to the executive director's report. Wayne, if you would, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I wanted to update everybody. So far, we have 7 local governments that have approved the resolution to change our charter. We're waiting to hear from a few more. We hope to get all those, all the other local governments who haven't responded yet to us in terms of their the approval of the resolution to change the charter sometime in the next month or so. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, this was brought up at the Transportation Plan Organization meeting, and we've talked to you about it before, that the Office of Management and Budget, which develops the definitions of what a metropolitan area is, what an urbanized area is, they have introduced changes to how that is defined. And by that, it calls for the metropolitan area to have a central city population, and it could be a central county, but the central city population of 100,000. Of course, at this point, until the census comes out, we don't know if even the city of Roanoke will hit that 100,000 mark. If they don't, there's a possibility that we will no longer be designated as a metropolitan statistical area. And in fact, I've seen some reviews, and out of the 386 or 84 metropolitan areas in the country, 144 of them would be eliminated if the new definition went through. But it's not just the metropolitan area, they're also redefining the urbanized area. And I think Matt Miller is on the call. Matt, do you want to explain what impact that redefinition would have? I think Matt's
Yes,
here.
there I am. I was just looking up some of those stats. But for the urbanized area, the census is looking at changing how it defines the population density and how far out it goes to pick up sort of enclaves or some of the outlying areas. And we expect those changes would shrink our urbanized area a little bit, which would mean that our TPO area for the urban transportation would possibly drop below 200,000 people, which has some implications there. But it's still too early to know.
Right. And thank you, Matt. And of course, if it, based on the new definitions, the way Matt described it to me, that we would probably lose Montgomery County as part of the TPO service area. That also would mean that if the TPO, if we don't reach that urbanized area of 200,000, then we will no longer be a transportation management area. And as we talked about the TPO, that means we wouldn't have the surface transportation block grant money for transportation projects. We wouldn't have to do a congestion management plan, and there may be other implications as well. The TPO authorized the staff under the signature of the chair of the TPO to send out a letter to the Office of Management and Budget objecting to the changes and asking that they maintain the current definitions or how they define both the metropolitan areas and the urbanized areas. So I wanted to come to you for the staff and ask if you would, that the commission would also like for us to send a letter to the Office of Management and Budget. And I'm coming now because all the comments have to be in by May 20th. Of course, our next meeting won't be until May 27th, so we'd like to have the regional commission, if you approve it, to move forward with a letter. And we will, of course, copy our senators and congressmen, but also other organizations such as the National Association of Development Organizations, the American MPO Association, the State Virginia Association of Planning Districts, and also share it with other planning districts in Virginia, regional commissions in Virginia.
Okay, so I guess what you need from us this afternoon is just a motion to approve a letter. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr.
Make
Chair,
that- I'll make, oh, excuse me, go ahead, Bill.
I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion to go ahead and, like in the TPO, we write a letter supporting the continued structure of our current TPO area and Allegheny Regional Commission.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a motion by
Mr.
the
Osborne.
Vice Sheriff Bill North. I think I heard a second, but I didn't recognize the voice.
Osborne.
Okay,
Okay.
Lee, thank you for the second.
And
All
we'll
right,
have
so-
to have a roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Before you go to the vote, I just wanted to make, I didn't make this comment at TPO because I was participating by, and I don't get to vote there anyway, but normally that would not restrain me from commenting. because I was on the phone, I feel like I could do so very effectively. But it's concerning to me that a change like this with such broad-reaching impact can be made simply, doesn't require any administrative process or legislative approval that to speak of. It could just be made by the Office of Management and Budget, and all of a sudden it affects how billions of dollars are potentially going to be spent. So when you talked about sending copies of this, which was not part of this motion, but was part of the other motion at the TPO level, sending copies to our congressmen, sending copies to other entities or organizations throughout the state that might be affected, to encourage them to also chime in. It seems to me that part of that might also be to raise the question of whether or not this kind of decision is something that should be made. I mean, should this not be statutory and actually require some kind of a legislative process in order to change? And I'm just curious. I mean, it just seems odd to me that something that will, I mean, this will send the TPO back to the dark ages. And I say that because we will no longer have control over any particular funds. It will change the funding for our Valley Metro bus system. I mean, it is a step backwards in a very fundamental way if some of the consequences that and it's just based on something that to me doesn't have any real meaning. So that's my concern.
And Mr. Chair, I echo those same sentiments of Mr. Osborne, which was my question today. We get $5 million a year for STBG grants through the TPO. That fund will dry up, will it not, or be reduced? Question for Mr. Strickland.
Yes, sir. It will go away.
Okay, so if that goes away, everything we do in the TPO in the way of greenway funding, in the way of funds from the pot of $5 million to leverage smart scale state projects goes away. And folks, we don't need that in the state of Virginia, because that pot of money for smart scale is stabilized and dropped below $1 billion over the last 3 iterations, I believe, of the VDOT allocation in the state budget. And to the point of writing to our local congressman, we need to particularly, Wayne, and I've thought about this as well since the last call, if I would definitely ask you and staff to make a presentation as needed to either legislative assistance in this area for U.S. Senators Kane, and get the message out how this is going to hurt us.
Yes.
because only letting them know the impact so that they can maybe leverage the OMB or go through somebody in the administration, are we going to be able to tap the brakes on this thing? And I totally agree with Lee. I mean, if they're thinking they're going to save money because that's nothing could be further from the truth, because the importance of how we use those funds is the only source of revenue we have. And it will definitely cripple the TPO.
Phil, Crystal, I completely agree with you. And I don't think it might not be a bad idea just to contact any of our state contacts that we have, like with DBRT, VDOT, any of that kind of thing, because this really just would cripple any of the major transportation projects any of us even have in the queue potentially that are in the 6-year plan that they're just still getting ready to finalize and adopt.
So, if you know, Wayne, I don't know if this is, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I don't know if this is just a Zoom call by inviting these folks for the U.S. senators and the congressmen, but I will tell you this, I was with 2 congressmen the other day, and one was not in favor of earmarks and one was, and at the end of the day, I mean, there's lots of revenue sources that are one-time funds coming from Congress and the American Rescue Plan, the American Relief Plan, the infrastructure bill, which has 2 parts. But at the end of the day, those are one-time funds that have to be spent in the next 3 years. If this goes away and the 6-year plan pretty much, for all intents and purposes, can go away, and a 2-pronged approach, including the state, would also be helpful, especially with.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
A couple of questions, actually, if you don't mind. What's the rationale for changing this, 1? And number 2, doesn't the Virginia separate city county situation really work against us in this case? And then 3, I'll keep going. OMB is an executive department. Shouldn't we be sending this to the president too?
Good point.
Yeah.
You can send it to legislators, but they probably don't have the authority to do anything. So I'd target the executive.
And that's a very good point. And as I think Mr. Osborne was asking, I think this is in statute. I think, you know, the census collects the information, but OMB has, I think, they're the ones that are focus. I mean, they're the ones that are responsible for making those definitions and changes, and it will have an impact. You read things that say it won't affect people because, you know, you don't give money by metropolitan areas, but they do. I mean, that would be, you know, several hundred billions of dollars that would not go to some of the, you know, our communities, and particularly in the metropolitan areas and school systems and all kinds of things. This was pointed out by someone about transportation. That's true as well. But when we send information to congressmen and senators, we send it to them, but I have a whole list of who their legislative aides are, who deals with transportation, who deals with economic development, who deals with, so we just send a letter off concerning the Economic Development Administration, asking them to increase the funding for EDA, and I copied all the people, and the letters that came back to me, of course, were the legislative aides or the legislative directors, but I also sent it to our local people. You know, Gwen Mason is Tim Kaine. I think I forget, but his name is Isaac. It works for, forgot his last name, for Warner, and then John Bieber works for Morgan Griffith. He's the district person for Morgan Griffith. Christine, I think, deals with Congressman Klein. So we try to get as many of those folks involved because, you know, they do all the grunt work up in Washington. They look at all these things that come in and, you know, and get the senator or the congressman moving. But I agree, it'd be great to get them all together and talk about it. See what we can do, particularly the local representatives, district offices for the senators and congressmen.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Lanford in Allegheny County. Doesn't affect us here, but I did Dan's question about the independent cities in Virginia and how that would affect the population in the Roanoke area as opposed to in other states. Is that a factor in this? Is anybody?
John, I think if you look at when we get material, and maybe Matt has a different response, but we get material in it, the cities are looked upon just like kind of as a municipal municipality, just as counties are. The towns, of course, are within the county boundaries, but it's not like when you talk about, I get the population of the city of Atlanta, that's right in the middle of Fulton County. So they'll give you the Fulton County numbers and could break out the city of Atlanta, but Atlanta is part of Fulton County. So instead of looking at just the city population, they'll look at the county population there, which is a few hundred thousand, several 100,000 people. But it doesn't, I don't know, Matt, I don't know if you have a comment about that or not, but it typically comes in, the counties and the cities are listed as if they were the same thing in Virginia.
Just a couple comments. I mean, I need to study the issue more, but I think we're muddling two different things here. One is the metropolitan statistical area definition, which is set by OMB, as Wayne said, and they're looking at changing that to 100,000. So that'll affect places like Blacksburg, Stanton, Waynesboro, maybe Charlottesville. I'm not sure that definition is going to change the MSA designation for Roanoke. And that is done by AMB, Office of Management and Budget, just because it's a statistical measure that they use. I'm not sure how much funding is tied to that. The other issue is the urbanized area of what is urban versus rural, and that's being changed by the Census Bureau. And that will affect the number of people that are in our urbanized area, which can influence the TMA designation for the TPO area. And that does affect transportation funding to the region. So I think we're talking about two issues, and it would be good to learn more about them and find out how they might impact our region.
And if you approve us writing the letter under the chairman's signature, we'll delve more into it. And of course, we'll discuss all the potential impacts that could affect us.
I have one question just about the process. If the census changed, do they have to post notice on the Federal Register?
I think the census change for the urbanized area is the one that has comments available to make until May 20th.
Right.
I'm not sure about the OMB change, if that has public comments.
So it is out. All right. So right now it's out for open comment.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Maybe Mr. Miller knows this, or maybe it's something to check into, but is the urbanized area determined by the density of population within census tract by census tract?
That's what they're proposing to change. So it used to be by density of population, something like 500 people per square mile. Now they're changing it to look at individual blocks, which is like a city block, and they're going to use housing units instead of population. So it's going to be 350 housing units per square mile. That's what's urban. But then they can jump out and grab something, say Ashley Plantation in Botetourt County can be part of the urbanized area if it's within a certain distance of the contiguous main urban core. That distance is changing. It used to be 2.5 miles. You could jump out and grab something, and they're proposing to only go out 1.5 miles now. So I think that's going to shrink our urbanized area a little bit.
That's why maybe Montgomery County wouldn't be part of the TPO any longer, because the density, Matt, you said it's that population from the Glenvar area in West County over to Elliston, Shawsville. There's nobody in between much.
Right, that distance between might be too great to include Montgomery County in the TPO area.
Right.
But if there's a census tract that's contiguous, a census tract in Roanoke County, for example, that's contiguous to the city of Roanoke, that would all be included in the urbanized count, would it not?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Going back to Dan's first question, do we have any idea why these specific changes are being proposed?
Well, the only thing, Mr. Osborne, one thing I can think of is that they do base decisions, money decisions on on some of these statistical areas. And I mean, I've seen it. I mean, well, we just talked about what the TPO would lose. I mean, we would have not, if we hadn't become a transportation management area, we wouldn't have received the $50 million we already have. And as Mr. North pointed out, we're going to continue to receive that $5 million or so every year. If that goes away, then we won't have that money to use for projects and leveraging, other projects with smart scale money.
Right, but you said we would no longer be a TMA if this change went through, and is that because the core urbanized areas, as the new definition would apply, that includes Botetourt, Roanoke City, Roanoke County, Salem, that was the core area. Then you have a portion of Bedford and a portion of Montgomery. We would lose some of those outlying areas because they're more than 1.5 miles, but they're not more than 2.5 miles. And it would take us below, is the threshold 200,000?
Yes. And as Matt pointed out, it's housing now. It's the number of housing units, not the number of people. It used to be people.
Yeah.
So
Obviously, this could have a major impact on our area. So, so if I recall, we do have a motion and
Yes,
a
sir.
second. So I guess we need any other comment or questions? No. Wayne, I guess we still need to call the roll, right?
Yes, sir. Mr. Lanford,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vanisdahl,
Yes.
Mr. Martin, Billy Martin. Mr. Billy Martin. Okay. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Dean Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mr. North,
Yes,
Mr. Osborne. Mr.
Yeah.
Osborne. Okay.
Yeah, I done you.
Ms. Onitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bestpitch,
Yes.
Ms. Moon Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Mr. Guzzler,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Ms. King,
Yes.
Mayor Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Irvin,
Yes.
Mayor Gross,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Mr.
you, sir.
Strickland, this is Billy Martin. I was on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll correct that.
Mr. Chairman,
Alright.
before we leave this topic, could I ask Matt Miller one question, please?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
To Matt, Phil North here. You got this correspondence in a package, I guess, from somebody about the OMB potential changes. Is that correct?
Yes, we've got them in various emails, and then some of these organizations have done their own analysis. So they're two separate issues, the OMB issue and then the urbanized area issue. So
Is there anything you can share with us besides what you have today? I mean, is there any condensed sheet you have or that you could shoot over to our county administrator as well as to our county attorney and or to me so I can distribute it to these folks?
sure, I can do that shortly.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, folks. Certainly appreciate that lively conversation. Important topic. Wayne, did you have anything further this afternoon?
No, sir. I was just going
Okay.
to introduce Mr. Hall. That's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, absolutely. Go right ahead. I wasn't
Well,
sure
I wanted to
if,
introduce John Hull is now the new executive director of the Roanoke Regional Partnership. John, I don't know if you know that John has a history with us. John interned with us and became a planner with us for several years and did a lot of economic development work. And then the partnership stole him and gave him more money. And now he's kind of risen to the like the head of the food chain over there. So John, we're so sure glad to have you here. And John, you may have seen an article in the paper a few months ago where John did an analysis of economic conditions after the first year of the COVID pandemic. So we asked John to come and speak to us about it. Give us some insights.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, I'm pleased to come and share information with you guys. I've presented similar information to Roanoke County and City of Salem in their work sessions, and so I have taken an even fresher look than that. Have some fresh information to share on economic conditions. So, is it okay if I share my screen?
Sure.
Please.
Yes.
Certainly.
Great. That look okay for you guys?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Good, very good. So thanks again. Trying to advance the slide. I'm not. Here we go. Very good. Okay. So first of all, I just want to share some really good news in the realm of population growth. For decades, Roanoke has been a lower growth market in population that's driven largely by an aging population, lower retention of young adults, and positive but slow in-migration of new residents. In 2020, things improved on that front. So population growth from 19 to 20, according to the Weldon Cooper Center of Public Service, the rate of growth in that 1 year was nearly quadruple the average annual rate over the last decade. Region grew by about 1,500 people. So growth is up over that year. Some indication that the livability strategy that this region, its governments, in the Roanoke Regional Partnership and others have engaged in is beginning to work. Looking longer term over the last 10 years, it's important to note, in spite of the last year's success, on a 10-year basis, the Roanoke region and the metro area are generally the lowest growth regions in Virginia, with the exception of Bristol. It's driven by age demographics again. All growth on a net basis is due to in-migration in this region. So there are more deaths than births on a net basis in terms of natural increase, or in our case, I should say natural decrease. So the talent attraction, the attraction of new residents is very important to our future. Here you can see by locality, regionally, Roanoke City, Salem, City of Roanoke, City of Salem, Roanoke County had significantly higher rates of growth. Botetourt County there would be next ranked in line. So growth did pick up in the last year. We hope that trend continues. Looking at consumer spending, according to tracktherecovery.org, has improved in this region, is at a level higher than pre-pandemic times. That's excellent news. Obviously, probably spending is supported by some of the stimulus, as well as other programs that have supported consumer spending in the last few months. So that's good to see. However, when you look at small business revenues, according to the same source, and I should note that this is really fresh, private type of data. I take a lot less stock in the actual percentage numbers as I do the overall trend, just because it's less reliable than some of the government stuff that comes out with a little bit of lag. But generally, I think we can say while consumer spending is up, small business revenues are down significantly. So consumers, spending with the stimulus programs and other programs supporting consumer demand, but local small business is not necessarily enjoying the recovery at a proportional level, okay, to the increase in consumer demand. Looking at unemployment, the general trend for unemployment was for a peak of unemployment in April, a relatively fast recovery, though unemployment does remain elevated. I have the Allegheny Highlands on this slide, as well as Franklin and Botetourt. Here on again, the general trend there was to go into the double-digit employment in April of last year, or very close to it. On this slide, we have City, County of Roanoke, as well as Salem City and the Roanoke Metro. So regionally, unemployment's back down to about 5.1%. That's down from 10.7 at its peak, but up from 2.6% right before the pandemic. So again, unemployment is down to lower levels, but they remain elevated above first quarter 2020 rates. Looking at the employment impact, the Roanoke market's ending out this past year of the COVID pandemic with approximately 6,000 jobs lost on a net basis. That's March year over year, 2020 to 2021. As you can see, there was a small dip. I don't know if you see my cursor or not, but in January of this year, that likely reflects a loss of some seasonal positions. December, there is still seasonality in this. A little hard to detect the seasonality with this extreme V shape, that you see last year. On the whole, the trend has been for a fairly rapid recovery of employment. The market was last at this level of employment in roughly 2013. So historically, a very large number of jobs still outstanding to recover. Unemployment again is at 5.1%. That's up a little bit from 4.4% in December, but down from the April levels. There are roughly 8,000 unemployed individuals. The increase in unemployment is about 3,300, which is much less than the net loss of employment. Again, the net loss of employment is roughly twice as much as that. So it reflects maybe potentially an increase in discouraged workers, but also with our aging population, it's likely that COVID has encouraged retirement of some workers as well. So the Metro has regained about 10,000 of roughly 16,000 jobs lost. And, of course, the Federal Reserve and others do believe that economy and job creation should begin growing much more quickly, though that remains to be seen. There's certainly lots of consumer demand, but multiple businesses, I think, on the street are reporting that it's difficult to find employees and retain employees. Likely the unemployment compensation could be, as well as other federal stimulus, could be playing a role in that. I think there are other issues likely to be worked out in the shift, the pandemic and post-pandemic and the new normal. And we'll talk about that in a bit, that may impact employment growth and recovery and may slow things down. Looking at it by industry, employment change from March 2020 to 2021, again, 6,000 jobs lost in the Roanoke Metro on a net basis. A third of those jobs, roughly a little bit more than a third of those jobs lost in the pandemic over the last year are in leisure and hospitality. Significant job losses in leisure, hospitality, government, business services, other services, and retail. These are in thousands. Okay, so when you see negative 6.3, that's a loss of 6,300, and these decimals are obviously represent hundreds of jobs. Okay. Housing remains a bright spot in the midst of the pandemic. Roanoke Valley Association of Realtors report 12.5% growth in units sold, 16.2% in average price. Inventories are extremely low, contributing to price appreciation amidst strong demand. If you look at this next slide, which is the Zillow Home Value Index, and this represents a little bit different type of value than you just saw, and that's because the Zillow Home Value Index represents a typical home value for a region, whereas the Association of Realtors is just an average of all homes sold. Again, so this is an index based on a typical market house. Roanoke saw 12-month change in terms of the typical house value of 8.7%. That's higher than Savannah and Blacksburg, comparable with Virginia Beach and Richmond, lower than some comps in other states, but on the whole, kind of middle of the pack in terms of home value appreciation. Wanted to share another piece of economic news. The Milken Institute of Best Performing Cities 2021 publication came out very recently. Annual ranking showed that Roanoke moved up 35 spots in that ranking over the last year, which is interesting. Note that the 100 is ranked 145th out of 200, but that's the 200 largest metros in the country. Okay, so just consider the fact that Roanoke is ranked versus Boston, Raleigh, Dallas, Nashville, Seattle, list goes on and on. It's in the largest category of 200 metros. Okay, so the 2021 ranking, though, shows strong performance in wage growth, in which Roanoke was ranked 81st out of 200. And in terms of 12-month job growth, it was ranked 59th out of 200. And in housing affordability, it was ranked in the top 30. Okay, it was 29th out of 200. So it reflects Roanoke's strength and resilience, as well as its position to grow in the age of remote workers. Okay, particularly the housing affordability. In regards to remote workers, anecdotes keep coming in of stories from realtors and others who know of technology workers, executives, et cetera, who are choosing this region to live. And the population growth numbers, again, from 2020 did show a strong bump. Milken Institute, I think, recognizes Roanoke's stronger position coming out of the pandemic and into the recovery, which is excellent news for our region. We'll talk a little bit about what the partnership is doing, just real briefly before I delve back into economic trends. So we did have a live in-person Blue Ridge Marathon held this past weekend. One of the first live in-person events of any size since, I think, the pandemic. So we had nearly 3,000 runners, 40 states and 5 countries, a music festival held afterwards. And I just point this out, because it's an important step in supporting the recovery of our regional tourism economy. It was a really positive sign of what's possible and what's to come. These kind of things can be held safely. Want to kind of mention in terms of locations and expansions, we have had 3 already this calendar year, with the location of Munners in Botetourt County, the expansion of Balcom in Alleghany County, expansion of Cardinal Glass in the Roanoke County area, of the Benton area of Roanoke County. These represent 265 jobs and $48 million in CapEx. So, and that's just in the first 4 months of the year. Positive decisions are being made by the private sector, and that's a good sign. We did see a substantial increase in interest in terms of our 50-acre plus projects, which are on the whole more impactful in terms of jobs and investment over the last year. I've shared this with each of the governments in our annual recap. And it's important to note because lead activity is brisk and strong, and there is private sector interest in investing in the region. And the work of the governments on investments like Summit View Business Park, the work that's going on at the Botetourt Center at Greenfield, as well as the Woodhaven Technology Park, where we have some larger site opportunities, is really driving some real interest, which is a positive sign. On the Woodhaven Technology Park front, which is a regional investment, substantial progress was made in 2020. Entrance road installed, signage installed, clearing started. This property is going to be at the highest level of readiness according to the state Economic Development Partnerships site certification program by the end of the year. And just one last partnership update before I get into some site selection, industries, trends, and other observations on the economy and where we are. In May of last year, we started a remote worker campaign to promote the region for as a great place to live for those who can work from anywhere, and had substantial success in getting the word out with almost 4 million impressions from places like LA, New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Washington, DC. Again, anecdotally, we're seeing some moves into the region, and that's a good sign. In the site selection industry, which we at the partnership are tied into and interact with on a regular basis, the food and beverage industry is strong. We're seeing some larger food and beverage projects. Distribution and e-commerce has a strong lead pipeline. We're actually seeing even more diverse manufacturing leads than just food and beverage here in 2021. In-person visits are making a comeback, but we think that remote elimination and virtual visits will be more common on the front end of projects. Generally, project activity is increasing. We have brisk interest, brisk lead activity. We think consultants, again, we're going to see a transition even more to more hybrid and virtual elimination, even though they are traveling in market. They're going to enjoy the same increased efficiency that the rest of the private sector world has enjoyed with Zoom and virtual meetings. We think foreign direct investment will likely stabilize, but that depends really heavily on the course of the pandemic, not only here, but across the world. new workforce opportunities, same challenges. So we have a kind of temporary surplus of lower skilled labor. We have new talent pools from the remote workers, but skilled labor shortages and skill mismatches, I think, are still a phenomenon. They're still an issue with preventing stronger growth moving ahead. Talent initiatives, workforce development initiatives are just as important as ever to match the employer with skilled pools of labor. Again, we may be 6,000 jobs down, but a third of those are in lower skill leisure hospitality. Final thoughts, employment is recovering, though it may slow down until pandemic conditions continue to improve. There's still issues with childcare access, skills mismatches, other obstacles preventing stronger labor recovery. Lower income and in many cases lower skill employees are the most heavily impacted. Leisure and hospitality demand, I think, is likely to improve with more vaccination, and that will lead to improvement in those employment numbers. Again, a third of the jobs lost in this region are in leisure and hospitality industry. Companies are, looking beyond the pandemic, now, because particularly in the greenfield space, planning for a time in which we think that pandemic, infection levels will be much lower. And last point, some of the fundamental challenges faced by the region prior to COVID are still in play. Lack of modern industrial building space, population decline, or at least slow population growth, and labor skill mismatches, I think are still an issue. That the pandemic has not changed that, though we do have a temporary surplus of labor. So with that, be happy to take questions or answer any questions you might have.
Okay, well, John, thank you very much. A lot of interesting information. Commissioner, are there any questions or comments? No. All right. Well, again, thank you, John, for that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I had a question for John.
Sure.
I always wonder about why our labor participation rate is so much lower than the state. I mean, the state before COVID was hitting 67, 68% labor participation. Ours is more in that 64, 65%. And I think, John, you pointed out in a meeting we had earlier today in Roanoke County that there are a lot of older people like myself who are leaving, and James Irvin, wherever James is, I mean, leaving the workforce. But there's still, that's 30-something% of our people who would be qualified to work aren't working. And I know that you pointed out that a lot of it has to do with childcare, but I mean, do you see that turning around anytime, or is that just going to be the way it is?
Well, Wayne, as I pointed out in that call, the labor force participation rate does not put an upper limit on age, right? So if you look at our median age statistics, you look at our age demographics, we are an older region. It's going to be natural for us to be a couple percentage points off of a Richmond or a Raleigh or another place like that. In terms of looking at it turning around, I mean, the talent attraction and development program that we have, I mean, we're certainly looking at, and with our outdoor promotion livability efforts, we're certainly aiming to attract young, productive workforce, right? So but it's a bit of a longer, it's probably honestly a little bit of a longer play, but it's work we need to do to support the region and its growth.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Well, again, thank you, John. Certainly appreciate that presentation.
Mayor, I'll make a quick comment because I think this is an outgrowth from the regional partnership. But the marathon that occurred this past week got a lot of very positive publicity and a lot of positive comments from volunteers who participated with it, from the participants primarily. But so just wanted to the extent that the partnership has a role in that, through the Roanoke Outside or otherwise, John, wanted to congratulate you all and thank you all for continuing to make that happen.
Thank you, Lee. And yes, and I should point out, just in case there's those on the call that don't know it, but Roanoke Outside Foundation, Roanoke Outside is a program of the partnership, and we are very proud to have brought that event back in a post-pandemic time. And so very, very, very happy to see it. I actually participated myself, and I think it's a positive sign of things to come. Thanks.
That's great. Yeah, very important event, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay, thank you folks for all that information. And next, I understand the commission staff has a presentation about the role of the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we try to do this periodically. We haven't during the COVID. We thought we'd be getting back together so we could have a formal kind of presentation orientation, but we do have a number of new members who have come on board since last summer. So we thought we'd go through a short orientation session for commission members. So next slide. So this is what we do, kind of in a nutshell. We bring together local governments and help to try to identify opportunities for collaboration and support and help them making informed decisions. We do that by either convening groups to talk about issues, preparing reports on issues of regional importance, providing direct technical assistance to our local governments, and by supporting either administratively or through technical support for organizations such as the TPO, the Regional Industrial Facilities Authority. What we don't do, and some people confuse us with local planning commissions, we don't substitute for local planning commissions. We don't make those kinds of decisions. And we don't actively are involved in recruiting new businesses to the region. That is the job of the regional partnership. And for terrorists, that's the job of Virginia's Blue Ridge and Teresa Hammond up in the Allegheny Highlands. So that we don't do those kinds of, we support organizations like that, but we don't do the direct marketing or anything like that. Okay, how we came to be, we are a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. We were formed, or the General Assembly, under the Hahn Commission between 1968 and 1969. They passed a law that allowed, legislation that allowed local governments to come together and create planning district commissions. And so you can see on the right-hand side, our mission is to be a leader in driving collaboration and strategy within our communities on issues that are critical to economic growth, quality of life, and sustainability of the region. And the next slide shows you the area we serve. And it's grown over the years because in 2004, and I believe it was 2006 or 8, Franklin County joined us in 2004, and not too long after that, the town of Rocky Mount joined the Regional Commission as a joint member with us and West Piedmont. We now have a population of about 334,000 people, and like I always tell people, and I don't know why I say that, but our district is about twice the size as the state of Rhode Island. So it's very big. It's a lot of ground to cover. As you know, if you've ever traveled from down near the Henry County line up to Covington or Clifton Forge, it takes a little bit of time to travel with those distances. And then, of course, the governance of our board are the 38 representatives. Next slide, please. The 38 representatives, and soon hopefully to be down to 30 representatives appointed by our member governments. We also, back years ago, the board approved, or the commission approved, us to invite regional chambers of commerce. So we have Joe Swall with the Roanoke Regional Chamber, and Teresa up in the Allegheny Highlands Chamber. We have the Roanoke Regional Partnership. We have Virginia's Blue Ridge. We have community colleges all participating, and we wanted to bring them to the table so we could have a regional conversation about regional issues. Next slide. This is what we do. We as an organization set the strategic agenda for the region, and that has resulted in a number of things. We've assisted the local governments in doing things such as like creating the broadband authority. Back in the late 90s, we housed the Greenway folks for a few years, and then the Greenway Commission was established. We've also done things like work with the Western Virginia Water Authority. We helped them in terms of getting information together. And of course, the authority ended up being developed back years ago. We approve the annual work program and the budget, or you do. We also explore issues related to transportation, the environment, energy, economic, and community development. One of the key things that we do is we bring people together to talk about regional issues and how we might work together. And then we facilitate, help our local governments in doing some planning work specifically in their jurisdictions. Next slide. And all this is done, and I want to first recognize Sherry Dean. Sherry, most of you know Sherry is our finance director. She does a great job, keep us on the path that's straight and narrow. And if you've heard the auditor's comments over the years, everything is running very smoothly here. But if you look at the numbers, less than 25% of our funds come from the local governments. But that means that 25 or 23% that you provide, the regional commission allows us to leverage another $4 or $5 to do all the many things that we do. So we appreciate your continuing support of the regional commission. Otherwise, we couldn't do all the things that we do every year for not only the region as a whole, but for our individual member governments. Next slide. I'm going through this quickly, but you'll get a copy of this when you get the minutes a little bit later. This will be in the packet. But these are all the things that we're involved in. We do a lot of transportation work, and that involves ride solutions, and you'll hear about those programs and projects later. We do a lot of regional planning work, but also direct technical assistance to our member governments. And we also help assist some of our sister organizations like the Broadband Authority, the Regional Industrial Facilities Authority with administrative work, as well as helping them by serving maybe as the fiscal agent. And that's highlighted too in this next slide. You'll see we're tied to all kinds of things. And at one point we had a little arrow pointing to the Western Virginia the Workforce Development Board, but since then they have kind of gone off on their own and hired their own fiscal agent or their own folks to handle their fiscal affairs. But we aren't involved directly with them anymore, although we still consider them a partner organization. And I wanted to recognize Virginia Mullins, as our office manager, because all the stuff you get, not all of it, but I'd say 95% of it comes from Virginia. She does a great job handling all of our meeting agendas and the minutes that she takes and some of the other key aspects that keeps this kind of organization running on day to day. So in the next slide, you probably know, you'll be seeing it next month, which is our annual work program. And every year we ask the local governments to provide us potential projects for us to consider for the next fiscal year. And as you know, many of you have served on the annual work program, and we get lots and lots of projects in. Some we do because in order to receive federal or state funding, we're required to do, but other projects come from our member governments. And so they're not only regional projects, but they're also local technical assistance projects. But this is, if people ask, well, how come a project didn't get into the annual work program? Well, it may be that we don't have some specific funding for the project, or it may be that we don't have the human resources to carry out or to undertake the project. For instance, we don't have an architect on the staff. We don't have an engineer on the staff per se. So we can't do those kinds of projects. The local government would have to go out and find those resources themselves. And that also ties into our staff expertise. And we don't, years ago, you don't see us doing a lot of human service or social service type things, because years ago, the commission said, do we have enough organizations trying to address issues related to social services and human services? And so let them do their work and you can support them, but don't take on any big projects related to that, because that's really, at that point, the commission said, that's not your job. But years ago, and then we can go on to the next slide. The commission said, you know, we're a regional planning organization, so we should do regional things. So you'll see in how we spend our time that over a third of it is spent in regional projects, and that, but you'll see urban transportation and, you know, other things. But most of it, in fact, the commission says, we want you to spend 70% of your time or your people's time doing multi-jurisdictional related projects. And then the rest of the time you can pick up on direct technical assistance for our member government. So that's kind of how we spend our time. And then the next slide shows you the staff we have. And it's, you know, a good looking bunch of people. There's some older people in the top left corner, but other than that, yeah, we have a great group of people here, and I'm very proud. And it's one of the things I'm proud of in this organization is the team we've put together. And I've mentioned this to you before. We have 12 people now, and when I came on in 1979, we had 11 people. So we've tripled the work that we do, but we've not tripled the number of people. And that's, we've used technology, we've used all kinds of things to try to you know, keep our staff size kind of lean and mean. So, but they have expertise in lots of different areas, and we're very glad that we have them all together, you know, working on specific projects. And I want to now turn it over to Christina. She's going to cover one of the key issues or key programs that we administer, and that's the transportation program.
Thank you, Wayne. Good afternoon to all of the commissioners. I'm happy to share with you some information about the Regional Commission's transportation program. It is, you saw in that pie chart, there are many pieces of the pie that actually relate to transportation. So it's actually the largest program of the commission, which there are many parts. The RVTPO you heard about at the beginning of the meeting a lot of, and it's an organization, of course, that's required to exist by the federal government to plan transportation for regions that have a population over 50,000. Of course, the discussion earlier about the area being a transportation management area and the responsibilities that go along with the RVTPO because of its size there's certainly a lot that goes into it. So the rural transportation program is another element of the work that's done here, and some of the same things that are done for the RVTPO are done in the rural area, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And then the Ride Solutions is a program that Jeremy will talk about in a little bit, and it's the Commuter Assistance Program. So the RVTPO is mainly federally funded, 80%, and the remaining 20% is provided through the state and local funds. And then the Rural Transportation Program and Ride Solutions is a mix of state and local funding. And like I said, most people in the office do some kind of transportation work at some point during the year. And I want to just point out Rachel Rulin and Brian Hill, who do more than half of their time really is spent in transportation. So thank you to them for all the work that they do to keep transportation planning going for the region. Okay. So this is the map that you saw earlier, but I wanted to point out the area that's delineated in purple in the middle is the Roanoke Valley, and that's the area that the RVTPO does planning for. The area outside of that purple is the rural transportation planning area. And you can see in that purple area, there's that section to the west with Montgomery County and then to the east with Bedford County. It's not part of the regional commission, but because of the current designation, it is included in part of the RVTPO. Next slide. So in terms of multimodal transportation planning, the work at the commission aims to advance top regional transportation priorities, and we do that through a number of ways. We have long-range transportation plans that are developed, and we're currently updating the Roanoke Valley's transportation plan. That's done every 5 years as required by the federal government. And even though that plan is done with the horizon of looking out to the year 2045 at the moment, it really only guides the actions the decisions that are made over the next 5 years and the types of applications that are submitted for the types of projects that are intended to support the vision and the goals of the future transportation system for the region. And similarly, we are doing a rural transportation plan update right now that's being led by Matt Miller. And so we're able to streamline the process and do collaboration for both areas. We did a survey last fall that covered the entire regional commission area, but it serves multiple purposes. So we also do short range transportation improvement programs that's looking out 4 years. It's another required document that shows how federal funds are being spent in the region. Wayne mentioned at the beginning of the meeting how congestion management planning is something that was new several years ago when that region was designated as a transportation management area. Then another item that was the result of becoming a TMA is that the RVTPO was able to receive STBG, Surface Transportation Block Grant, and Transportation Alternatives funding. And together, well, it's $5 million, I think Vice Chair North mentioned, is what we receive about every year for allocation in the RVTPO area. And then TA funds, we get about $500,000 every 2 years. And then the staff here also conduct a variety of transportation studies, and we assist with grant applications and write those grant applications on behalf of the RVTPO as well as the Regional Commission, particularly when it comes to smart scale. Next slide. We also engage in transit planning. Part of the funds that the commission receives is from the Federal Transit Administration. And so we're able to help localities and transit agencies plan for transit service improvements. And we've done that through the Roanoke Valley Transit Vision Plan. We also have a rural transit study, and then helping specifically with the transit providers, Valley Metro and Radar, and the services that they provide in the Allegheny Highlands as well as the Roanoke Valley. And just helping them in whatever way they need to improve their services and serve the needs of citizens in the region. Next slide. Bicycle and pedestrian planning has certainly become more and more popular, especially as we work to improve the outdoors and support the work of like the partnership that we were just hearing about and promoting the Roanoke Outside marketing. There is a regional bicycle and pedestrian committee. And if you know of anyone that's interested, we are accepting applications right now for people to be a part of that committee. There have been regional bikeway plans, pedestrian plans that have been developed for the region. We also help the Greenway Commission when they do updates of their plans. And then we do a lot of data analysis and monitoring of bicycle and pedestrian use in the region, whether that's on bicycle lanes or on greenways. Next slide. And I will pass it over to Jeremy to talk about ride solutions.
Thank you, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeremy Holmes. I am the director of the Ride Solutions Commuter Assistance Program. As Christina said, we're part of the overall kind of transportation programming of the commission, and we're one of the ways to think about what we do is a lot of implementation of, say, congestion management or transit planning or some of these things, insofar as our charge from our funders, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, is to move people out of single occupant vehicles and into high occupant vehicle modes, which means things like carpool transit, van pull service, biking, walking, and increasingly popular this past year, at least, teleworking is a way to get cars off of the road. So that's our main charge. Increasingly, a big focus has always been commute. But as we look at quality of life issues, as we look at issues surrounding, maybe teleworkers moving here And so they're teleworking to a job elsewhere, but they're still, trying to get around their communities and neighborhoods. We do look at non-commute transportation as well. That's where a lot of our transit and active lifestyle programs come into play. But it's all focused on trying to keep our cars off the road, keep congestion down, and help manage our road networks. As I mentioned, we were funded from a grant from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. The program started in 2001 as an air quality mitigation program addressing an ozone early action plan at the time. It's hard to remember this now, but once upon a time, the Roanoke Valley's air quality was very similar to that of Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia and Richmond. We had some of the worst air quality in the state. And so Ride Solutions was one of the several mitigation factors that came in to try to reduce that air quality issues. Since then, that has largely been addressed. We haven't been in danger of non-attainment for probably a decade or more at this point, but the mission of Ride Solutions has also expanded to address economic development, quality of life issues, community development, and workforce transportation. We've also expanded the territory we cover. As you kind of noticed in that first point, we started as a program just a part of the commission and covering the same areas that the commission's footprint does. We had since grown to partner with the New River Valley Planning District Commission, now New River Valley Regional Commission, the Central Shenandoah or Central Virginia Regional Plan Commission, previously Region 2000, and West Piedmont. We all share one commuter assistance program brand because there's a significant amount of commuter transportation that connects all four of our regions. So as such, I think the Ride Solutions program is about the size of the state of Massachusetts, which I assume is bigger than Rhode Island. And we are the largest geographic commuter program in the state of Virginia. So we do cover a lot of territory, even extending into North Carolina and West Virginia when we deal with the commute sheds of, say, Virginia Tech or some of our large employers in the Danville, Pennsylvania region. The best way to think about what we do is that we're very much a marketing and behavior change program. Our job is to try to influence people and convince them to do something other than to drive alone. So a lot of our work is advertising, events, persuasive campaigns, working with employers. To that extent, Tim Pola-Thomas is our outreach and communications specialist. You have probably gotten an email or a newsletter or maybe done a video, been on video with him on some kind of a program. He does a ton of work both for Ride Solutions as well as the Commission's public relations and public outreach program. It does a fantastic job at that. So within that kind of marketing element, we work with two broad audiences. One is directly with commuters. So if you've seen any of our the events that we've done, maybe some of our advertisements on television, those are often things that we're talking directly to commuters about the benefits of changing mode. A lot of our work, however, is actually done at the employer level. We have an extensive employer outreach program where we work with facilities and HR directors at small companies, large companies, on trying to communicate the benefits to their employees of changing modes. This has impacts on everything from parking management to workforce transportation, getting people to fill jobs, sustainability goals that employers might set, and so forth. So we do a lot of work at industrial parks and large companies all over the region on trying to make sure that we can get people to work. As I mentioned, ultimately, while we're working on meeting those goals with the state, we're also working to support folks like the work that John does at the Economic Development Partnership with helping make sure the region is an attractive and livable place by having, say, safe bike commuting and good transit, working to keep that air quality from ever getting in danger of reaching those non-attainment levels again. And in general improve and maintain the quality of life in the region. And we do work, we've probably worked with every local government on some way or another on some sort of consultation sort of aspect. We've done work on assisting with parking management in downtown Roanoke, for example, electric vehicle assistance, other kinds of recreation and transportation assistance, just to help let folks know what resources are out there and strategies that can help manage traffic on our region's roads. Next slide. And I think that's it for me.
Right. Good afternoon. This is Matt Miller again. I'm the Director of Information Services. So many of the IT things here in the office I'm responsible for, as well as a lot of the data and mapping that we do. So we try to disseminate current demographic data, such as from the U.S. Census Bureau or for the Virginia Employment Commission, and provide that in our newsletters or per requests from local governments. We're able to do a lot of mapping in GIS here. And most of our studies involve some form of mapping, but we can also do standalone requests for local governments for specific short-term projects. We have the ability to do economic impact analysis, such as an event or a new building or facility that's being constructed. We have specialized software called InPlan that allows us to do some of that work, and we've done some specific studies that you may have seen before relating to that. I put redistricting on here because it's a census year. In the past, we've assisted the city of Roanoke. Mr. Bispich and a few others may remember the ward system. When I first started here 27 years ago, that was one of the first projects I worked on, was helping the city with some developing the ward system. But in 2000 and 2010, we did redistricting for, I think, Allegheny County, the city of Covington, and Craig County. So we are looking at updating our software, which helps us create those boundaries to meet the legal requirements. So that's a service that we'll be able to offer for some of the localities in the next year or two. We have software and services to conduct surveys, either for specific projects for public input or getting the word out about some of the work that we do via the surveys and using social media. And we also provide technical assistance to localities. Sometimes we do special contracted work with nonprofits such as United Way or TAP if they need assistance with some demographics analysis or mapping. So that's the type of work that I'm involved with to some degree beyond the regular transportation and regional projects. Next slide. I think Eddie.
Good afternoon. I'm Eddie Wells, Director of Community Development Programs. The first work we're going to review is some of the work we do in economic development. A lot of that work is done with Matt Miller and also Wayne and his leadership with a lot of the state and federal agencies and years of contacts with all the businesses in the areas. One of our main projects over the past 10 years or so, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. That was actually something that John Hull worked on when he was here. The SEDS, several of you are on the SEDS committee. We've been meeting recently to look at priority economic development projects for the region. The SEDS is done as a requirement for the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Projects have to be included in the SEDS if you are applying for EDA funding. So that usually nets us an extensive list of projects in that plan. We do support for tourism. Again, I guess Matt does a lot of the survey work, the economic impact of events and tourism. Amanda McGee on our staff who supports a lot of the Greenway, Blueway work, things like that. Working with Virginia Tourism Association to get grants to help out with those efforts. Enterprise zone assistance. Again, we worked with Allegheny Highlands on their original enterprise zone application and mapping. I believe Matt still keeps up the online version of that map that is still being used for those incentives. Broadband planning, do a lot here in the Roanoke Valley with the Roanoke Valley Broadband Authority, and also with our rural areas, working with Department of Housing and Community Development, looking at broadband planning for expanding service to the rural areas. I know we just recently worked with Watershed County on a broadband application that was submitted a couple of months ago. Assistance to the Western Virginia Regional Industrial Facility Authority. Virginia and Matt are both working on that. Matt keeping up, I guess, part of the website, I believe, and Virginia handling a lot of the sort of administrative work as far as minutes and agenda packages and things like that. Assistance to the Roanoke Valley Broadband Authority. Again, Matt is working with them on not only their meetings and some of the administrative work, but also a lot of the mapping, making sure that your everything shows up in your local utility layers, so that the lines aren't cut or damaged while construction is going on. And Matt already mentioned the implant services. I think this year we're doing an impact study for the Allegheny Highlands arts and crafts impact. We'll be looking at outdoor recreation impact for the Allegheny Highlands next year, I believe is in our work program. Next slide. Community development work. A lot of this is done with Brian Hill and I handle a lot of the grant writing and management assistance, especially when it comes to ARC and community development block grants. That pretty much covers the gambit from housing rehabs to downtown revitalization, medical clinics, site prep for industrial sites. CDBG covers a lot of different things. Zoning ordinances and comprehensive plan updates. I'm involved in that. Amanda McGee's involved. Ron is involved in those. I think we've all worked on various plans, particularly in the rural areas for our localities that don't always have enough staffing to cover some of those efforts. Emergency and hazard mitigation plans. One of the more important things that we do every 5 years is the update of the FEMA hazard mitigation plan. This is the plan that qualifies the localities for the hazard funding that comes out after either flooding or blizzard or tornado or things like that. The 5-year plan really looks at what the region's needs are, how those needs can be funded, and how the localities can work together to address those needs. Some of our emergency planning. I know in the upcoming year's work program, we have a hazardous materials plan update that we're doing for the Allegheny Highlands. We've done those for the Roanoke Valley. We've done downtown evacuation plans. We've done emergency operation plans, things like that. We have a fairly good working relationship with Virginia Department of Emergency Management. Coordination of regional groups. Again, things like the Blue Wave Committee, there's a storm that Amanda does. There's a Stormwater Committee that Gabriel Irrigay does here on our staff. That also includes, I guess, some of the organizations that we've been directed by the localities to coordinate. Brian Hill coordinates the homelessness task force, I believe is the Blue Ridge. Anyway, homelessness committee, I don't know the exact wording.
Yeah, think of it as what goes through a window. It's the brick, the Blue Ridge Interagency Council on Homelessness.
Yes, thank you, Brian. The housing study also this year, I know a lot of you participated in the regional housing study that Brian coordinated. That effort resulted in a huge housing document that was adopted by the commission back in December with a lot of really good local recommendations about what can be done to address not only low-income housing, but also market rate housing. And I guess for lack of a better term, worker housing. You know, how do we continue to grow the region and attract industries to the area without having an adequate housing stock for those employees. Local foods planning is something that Amanda McGee's been working on. Even as a graduate student, she started on that. She's continued to work with LEAP and a lot of the other partners, such as the co-ops and the agricultural sector on that. We do continue to work on that, looking at things such as food hubs and farmers markets, and trying to find ways for localities to work together and fund a lot of those local food efforts. Next slide. Environmental planning. This is really mostly Amanda and Gabriel's work. The Chesapeake Bay Phase 3 Watershed Implementation Plan is something new that we just started last year. Virginia Department of Environmental Quality is I guess utilizing the planning district commissions in the Bay Area to assist with implementing the Chesapeake Bay Plan. We've been working with them for I guess over a year now on implementation of the Bay Plan. That includes outreach, identifying areas where best management practices should be put into place. I know Amanda and Gabriel have been wrapping up a new grant that is going into the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for funding to look at some additional planning efforts in our Chesapeake Bay area next year to identify priority areas for protection. Stormwater management. We have a stormwater management committee that meets, I believe, on a quarterly basis here in the Roanoke Valley. Gabriel manages that. Water supply planning. State Water Control Board has required each locality to have an adopted water supply plan. For our region, we're split into, I believe, 3 different areas. So there's 3 different plans. Amanda worked on the update of those. There's one for the Allegheny Highlands, one for the Roanoke Valley, and one for Craig and Newcastle. So those were done just a couple of years ago. Watershed improvement plans. We work with DEQ on what they call TMDL, total maximum daily load studies, which are really just pollution studies of the watersheds and streams and rivers in the area, trying to improve water quality through that. Amanda works with the Roanoke River Blueway Committee to support the Roanoke River Blueway development. That includes everything from the Blueway Committee meetings to field work, mapping, grant writing, fundraising, a little bit of everything on that. Assisting with water trail planning. We will also assist other localities and as they try to improve their access, whether that's the Upper James in Botetourt County or the Jackson and Calpasture in Allegheny, Covington, Clifton Forge area. Supporting regional urban forestry initiatives. The Commission's been involved in urban forestry for a very long time. They were doing that over 20 years ago before I started. And we continue to work with the urban forestry groups, doing things like the Arbor Day Foundation grants that Amanda does every year for the tree plantings. Several localities, I believe Benton and Salem, did those recently. And cooperative projects with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy and other regional stakeholders. Some of you may be familiar with the Triple Crown project and the, I guess, the shuttle service to McAfee's Knob and some of the ongoing issues there with, how do we continue to have the Appalachian Trail and use it as a tourist draw, but manage it so that it's sustainable. And we've actually had people from National Park Service. I believe Amanda's been meeting with them. I think it's a 3 or 4 day meeting this week that she's been participating in. So I believe that is the last slide, Tim. It is. I guess we go back to Wayne.
Right. Well, thank you. I think what illustrates is the diversity of work that we do. In fact, some of our employees say love working here because they don't just do one thing over and over again. They do lots of different things. And as you can tell from the descriptions provided by our directors, that lots of people are involved in transportation. They're involved in economic community development. So as I said earlier, we have a great staff, and want to thank you, of course, for being a member and continuing to contribute funding so that we can do all the many things that that you've asked us to do, and that kind of citizens of the region have asked us to do. So thank you, Mayor Gross.
All right, thank you, Wayne. That was a great presentation, a good orientation for our new folks, and a great reminder for those of us that have been around a while and all the many different things that were involved. I'd like to take this opportunity also just briefly to thank the staff. I've always felt we have a very professional, very motivated staff here at the Regional Commission. They do a great job, and as you mentioned, they are more or less cross-trained to help each other out with different programs.
Right.
I just think it's a very powerful staff. And actually, Wayne, I think that's one of your greater accomplishments, is to maintain the professional staff that we have here at the commission. As you mentioned, just about the same size as always, but they really turn out a lot of work. So thank you, folks. Thank you. Okay. And with that, we will move on to the next item, which is other business. Is there anything else to come before the commission this afternoon? Any closing remarks from the commissioners? No?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to echo your statement there a little while ago. In my time on the Board of Supervisors, I've requested on behalf of the county 3 different projects that have been completed. And when I learned the commission could entertain those, I'm like, we need to be looking at the housing, and we need to be looking at the I-81 corridor to quantify how many trucks could be moved off there. And also, what was the other study we did?
CTE study.
CTE study, yes, absolutely, about a regional technical center, which is still got alive and well, and at least it is in our hearts in Roanoke County's Board of Supervisors as we begin to meet with our schools. So, and I've got another thing in mind, but I'm holding that back, Wayne. I'm not going to bother you with that before you walk out the door, probably. But
okay,
because of your entertaining these projects, and we on behalf of Roanoke County, I want to thank you because you've always been good to work with, and you folks went and got grants, and the projects were completed. And we know that leadership will transcend to the continued mission of the Regional Commission, and we look forward to working on other projects in the future. And I'd encourage other people as well. If you have a project or so, the commission's got the right people at the right time at the right place, or looking for something new, and all you got to do is just throw it out there and see if it sticks. And if it's something they can handle. I don't know of anything they've turned down that they couldn't handle, but I won't ask Wayne if there were any, because I don't want to spoil this statement. But thank you very much for your leadership and help on those projects. And also, James, I just want you to know we're going to miss seeing you. Wayne, can we let you and James have a 6-month membership to continue to tune in to hear what's going on if you want to?
No, I think James is headed out west or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like he's going
fishing. Yeah, going fishing. Yeah.
Well, anyway,
thank you.
Good luck to you, James. And Mr. Mayor, thank
you. Thank you, Phil, for those comments. And I was just headed in that direction too. As a matter of fact, James, I certainly want to thank you for your help over the years. You've made a great contribution to the Regional Commission, and you've been a help to me personally. So I want to thank you for that, and I hope you enjoy all that fishing. Rumor has it that James and Wayne are going to do a very intensive study golf courses and fishing lakes. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe you'll be able to get some funding for that. So,
Put in a grant.
all right.
What do you say?
Billy, did you have any remarks this evening before we close?
No, of course, we all don't want to see, we hate to see Wayne go, but I'm glad that he's taken this step. I can tell you many, many stories that's happened on the road and at the different events that we've been at, but Wayne has always been a good support of mine. He mentored me. He got me involved in about everything we do down here in the TPO, the Regional Commission, the Virginia PDC, the Virginia Roanoke River Advisory Committee. Just so many things, and I look at them as fun, not work. And I've learned a lot, and I'm going to miss him. I don't know who I'm going to give my free drink tickets to now.
I'm sure there'll be someone. Yeah. I'm sure there'll be someone.
The gentleman's got a hand up over here, the gentleman from Roanoke City.
Who is that?
I see Bill's got his hand up
Take
there.
them off your hands.
Take care of that.
Especially if you can bring on any of those cigars you were talking about last time.
Right. But anyway, Wayne, we appreciate you. And again, all the things that you've done for the Roanoke Valley, for the region, for the state. We probably can't sit here and thank you enough, but we certainly appreciate you and going to miss you.
Thank you.
You bet. And by the way, folks, I might mention we are going to give the commissioners an opportunity to make any comments or throw any darts or whatever they want to do at our June meeting. So if you folks want to have any comments concerning Wayne's departure, we'll certainly have time for that at our June meeting. So anything else for this afternoon? If nothing else, I've been told we don't have to take a vote to adjourn anymore.
That's right,
so
Mr. Chairman, you can just adjourn it.
You don't want me yelling that out too loud. I know what it is.
All right, folks. Well, thank you for a good meeting. Appreciate all of you being here this afternoon. And the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
God bless.
See you.